The quantum redefinition of impossible. In everyday language, impossible is treated as a wall, something absolute, unchangeable, and outside the reach of human effort. But from a quantum perspective, the idea of impossible dissolves instantly. What people call impossible is usually just something that doesn't fit within their current identity, logic, or emotional conditioning. It's not that the outcome can't exist, it's that the person has never experienced the inner configuration required to make space for it. Quantum physics shows us that reality is a field of probabilities, not certainties. The impossible is simply a probability that your nervous system and mindset have not yet learned to recognize or collapse into form. When viewed through this lens, the impossible becomes less like a barrier and more like an unopened door. As Greg Braden often explains, the world around us is reactive, not proactive. In other words, reality is not deciding for you, it's responding to you. Most people interpret external conditions as fixed, but the quantum field reveals that potentials are always shifting, waiting for coherence, clarity, and emotional alignment. What looks impossible without evidence becomes inevitable when the observer carries the inner signature of certainty. That's why faith, in its deepest form, is not a belief. It's a physics of consciousness. This is where the idea of impossible begins to collapse. When someone experiences a breakthrough, whether it's healing a long-term condition, manifesting a career leap, or attracting the relationship they never thought they deserved, the shift didn't come from luck. It came from a new internal configuration. Joe Dispenza shows countless brain scans proving that when a person enters coherent elevated emotion, new neural pathways emerge and the brain starts predicting a different future. The field then reorganizes around this new prediction. What others call a miracle is often just a coherent signal meeting the right probability at the right time. So the question is no longer, is this possible? But am I aligned with the version of me for whom this is normal? Because the quantum field doesn't care about difficulty, it only reads vibrational compatibility. Once that compatibility is established, reality behaves differently. And if the impossible is simply a probability waiting for the right internal state, the next question becomes unavoidable. How does the quantum field actually hold every possible outcome? And what determines which one moves closer to your experience? The quantum field of possibilities, where the impossible already exists. The quantum field is often described as a space of pure potential, a realm where every possibility already exists in an uncollapsed state. To someone unfamiliar with this idea, it may sound abstract or mystical, but it's grounded in the core of quantum physics. Before anything becomes physical, it exists as probability. Every future you can imagine, and every outcome you consider impossible, is already present in this field as a waveform. You're not trying to create something from nothing. You're learning how to align your internal state with one of the infinite possibilities that already exist. This changes everything because it removes the idea of lack and replaces it with the science of alignment. Think of the quantum field like a vast ocean filled with currents you cannot see. Each current is a potential timeline. The moment you observe a possibility with enough emotional intensity and coherence, you begin to resonate with that current. That's why the field responds not to desire alone, but to the emotional quality behind the desire. Joe Dispenza explains that elevated emotion is what lifts a potential out of the background noise and brings it into your perceptual reality. It's not magic, it's resonance. When your internal frequency matches a specific probability, the field begins reorganizing in that direction. What once felt distant becomes magnetically closer. People experience this all the time without realizing it. Think of the moments when a solution suddenly appears after days of frustration, or when someone says, "It's strange, the moment I stopped obsessing over it, everything fell into place." What happened there is that their emotional signature finally aligned with a probability that had always been available but blocked by tension and resistance. In the quantum field, tension pushes possibilities away. Coherence pulls them in. The impossible is only impossible when the body is broadcasting incoherence. Once coherence is achieved, the field becomes responsive, fluid, and surprisingly generous. If this explanation has expanded your understanding or sparked a deeper sense of clarity, I invite you to support this work with a like and a subscription. It helps this content reach more people who are ready to shift from limitation into possibility and step into the physics of creation with awareness. And now that we understand the field holds all possibilities, the next question becomes essential. Why do some people collapse empowering timelines effortlessly while others remain stuck in the same version of reality, despite wanting change? Faith versus belief. The emotional physics behind collapsing reality. Most people think faith and belief are the same thing, but in quantum manifestation they function very differently. Belief is mental. It's an idea, a concept, something the mind agrees with when it feels convenient. Faith, however, is vibrational. It is a state of being where the nervous system, the heart, and the mind operate in coherence. Belief can be shaken by circumstances, but faith remains steady even when nothing outside provides evidence. This is why belief rarely collapses a probability into form, while faith often does. Faith carries emotional intensity, somatic certainty, and a stability that allows the quantum field to respond without interference. Belief says, I think it might happen. Faith says, it already exists, I just need to align with it. This shift turns the person from a beggar of reality into a participant in creation. From a physics standpoint, belief still holds doubt as a background frequency. The field reads this as incoherence. The signal becomes noisy, unstable, conflicting. Faith, on the other hand, produces a clear electromagnetic signature. HeartMath Institute's research shows that coherent emotional states generate structured, powerful waves that influence both biological systems and external patterns. In simple terms, belief whispers, faith broadcasts. And here's the surprising part. Many people think they have faith when, na verdade, they're just hoping with intensity. Hope is beautiful, but it is not the same thing as faith. Hope says, I wish this would happen. Faith says, I know who I become when this happens. Hope keeps the desire in the future. Faith anchors it into the present identity. This is why individuals who manifest the extraordinary often describe a sense of inner knowing before the result appears. Their external world had not changed yet, but their internal state had already shifted to match the reality they were moving toward. So the real question is, how does someone step into this internal state of faith without forcing it, pretending or relying on positive thinking? Because sustaining faith requires more than mental conviction. It requires becoming a version of yourself who can hold coherence even when circumstances disagree. And that naturally brings us to the next essential step, your identity in the quantum field. Because who you believe you are determines which realities you're able to collapse. The quantum identity of the creator, who you are in the field. In quantum manifestation, identity is not a psychological detail. It is the core frequency the field responds to. People often try to change their reality while holding on to the same internal identity that created their limitations. But the quantum field does not deliver outcomes based on what you want. It mirrors who you are being. If someone identifies as the one who always struggles, the field organizes around struggle. If they see themselves as the one who tries but never succeeds, the field matches that pattern. Identity is the broadcast that precedes all manifestation. Before collapsing a new reality, you must inhabit a new version of yourself. This concept aligns perfectly with ancient spiritual teachings and modern neuroscience. Jesus said, according to your faith, be it unto you, which can be read as, according to the identity you embody, reality responds. Meanwhile, neuroscience shows that identity is a network of neural pathways shaped by repeated emotional experiences. When someone repeatedly feels unworthy, unseen, or unsupported, their brain wires that identity as truth, and the field receives a corresponding low-coherence signal. To manifest the extraordinary, a person must upgrade the internal narrator from I am limited to I am the one who creates through alignment. A practical example. Imagine two people applying for the same opportunity. One walks in thinking, I hope they pick me. The other arrives thinking, I bring value that aligns with this position. The external actions may look similar, but the internal identity is worlds apart. The first person vibrates neediness, the second vibrates coherence. The quantum field does not reward desperation, it responds to clarity. This explains why people who deeply know who they are tend to attract synchronicities, support, and opportunities that seem almost unfairly aligned. Their identity acts as a magnet. So if identity is the true engine behind manifestation, how do you shift it in a deep and lasting way? How do you stop living from old emotional patterns and start embodying the version of yourself who naturally collapses bigger realities? The answer lies in a powerful, measurable phenomenon: heart-mind coherence. The moment when your entire system broadcasts a unified signal that the field can finally hear. Heart-mind-faith coherence. The signature, the field finally understands. Heart-mind coherence is the moment when the brain and the heart stop broadcasting conflicting instructions and begin operating as one unified system. Most people try to manifest using thoughts alone, but thoughts without emotional alignment produce a fragmented electromagnetic signal. The brain says one thing, the heart feels another, and the body enters confusion. The quantum field reads this as noise. But when someone reaches heart-mind coherence, the entire system emits a stable, powerful, structured frequency. Research from HeartMath shows that the electromagnetic field of the heart is far stronger than that of the brain, which means emotion, not thought, is what actually drives creation. To collapse a probability into reality, the field must receive a clear, coherent signal. This is where faith enters the equation. Faith is the emotional glue that binds thought and feeling into one vibrational truth. Without faith, the heart hesitates, even when the mind insists. Without coherence, faith wavers, even when the desire is strong. But when thought, emotion, and belief move in the same direction, the body becomes a transmitter of precision. In this state, the quantum field is no longer confused about the reality you wish to access. It becomes magnetically drawn to the internal consistency you're broadcasting. A practical example. Imagine someone who wants financial abundance but feels fear every time they pay a bill. The thought says, I want prosperity, but the heart says, I don't feel safe. Incoherence. Now imagine this same person practicing heart-focused breathing for 2 minutes, softening their chest, recalling moments of gratitude, and then setting an intention. Suddenly, both systems align. The emotional body feels safe, the mind becomes clear, and the identity expands. This creates an electromagnetic signature that the field can actually respond to. Coherence is not a spiritual metaphor. It is a physiological shift that rewrites the broadcast of your entire being. Once someone experiences heart-mind-faith coherence even once, they recognize its power. Reality responds differently. Intuition sharpens. Synchronicities increase. Obstacles lose their emotional weight. But coherence is only the beginning. If the body carries unresolved fear, trauma, or survival emotions, coherence becomes fragile and easily disrupted. And this leads us to the next essential layer of manifestation: the emotional blockages that sabotage the signal long before it reaches the field. Survival emotions versus creation emotions. Why the field rejects incoherence. Most people don't realize that their emotional baseline, not their desires, is what informs the quantum field. Emotions like fear, anxiety, shame, and overwhelm belong to what neuroscience calls the survival state. In survival, the body prepares for danger. It becomes chemically incompatible with expansion. The problem is that most people attempt to manifest from this state. They try to attract abundance while feeling lack, seek love while feeling unworthy, or pursue healing while fearing the worst. The field reads this mismatch as incoherence. You can want something with your mind, but if your emotional body is still bracing for threat, the field cannot respond. Creation emotions, on the other hand, gratitude, love, joy, trust, produce a completely different signal. These emotions open the heart, expand perception, and generate measurable coherence in the heart-brain system. Joe Dispenza refers to these as elevated states, and they create the conditions in which new possibilities can enter your life. In elevated emotion, the nervous system relaxes, the prefrontal cortex becomes more active, and the electromagnetic field around the body becomes more structured and harmonious. This is the moment when the field finally recognizes your intention as a real broadcast instead of background noise. A practical example: imagine someone trying to manifest a new career. If they're acting from panic, burnout, or desperation, their frequency repels opportunities, even if they're working hard. But if they shift into trust, gratitude, and clarity, the same emails get answered, doors open, and conversations flow. It's not luck, but resonance. Opportunities that were previously invisible become available because survival emotion was blocking perception. Once the nervous system exits fight or flight, intuition strengthens and the mind begins noticing pathways it couldn't see before. The field responds because the internal frequency finally matches the desired timeline. This is why advanced manifestation requires emotional mastery. You cannot access elevated realities while emotionally anchored in survival. The field doesn't reject you, it rejects incoherence. To collapse bigger probabilities, the emotional body must become a safe place for expansion. And once someone understands this, a deeper question emerges. How do you release the survival-based programs encoded in the subconscious mind that keep pulling you back into the same old timelines? The subconscious programs, the invisible code that controls your quantum results. The subconscious mind operates like an invisible operating system that runs quietly beneath your awareness, shaping your emotions, decisions, and energetic broadcast. Much of what people interpret as fate, bad luck, or resistance is actually the subconscious replaying old programs. These programs are formed through repetition, emotional intensity, and early experiences, especially during childhood when the brain is highly impressionable. If someone spent years absorbing messages like, life is hard, money doesn't come easily, or love means pain, their subconscious stores these narratives as truth. And since the quantum field responds to your dominant emotional patterns, not your conscious hopes, these programs determine which probabilities collapse into reality. Neuroscience shows that around 95% of our daily behavior is driven by subconscious patterns. This means people often think they're choosing consciously, when in reality their decisions are guided by old emotional memories. For example, someone might want a stable relationship, yet repeatedly attracts unavailable partners because their subconscious equates love with instability. Another person may desire abundance but subconsciously associate money with danger or loss. The field picks up these emotional signatures, not the rational desires. As long as these programs remain unaddressed, the person keeps collapsing the same timelines, no matter how hard they try. Changing these patterns requires bringing them into awareness. When someone notices a recurring emotional reaction, defensiveness, jealousy, fear of failure, avoidance, they're seeing a subconscious program trying to stay alive. The goal isn't to fight these programs but to interrupt them with new emotional experiences. Practices like heart coherence breathing, journaling, visualization, and somatic awareness help weaken old patterns and install new ones. Joe Dispenza's research shows that when people repeatedly pair elevated emotion with new self-images, they rewire neural circuits and overwrite subconscious memories. This is how the old self begins to dissolve and the quantum creator starts to emerge. But even after updating subconscious programs, there is another layer determining your relationship with impossible outcomes. Your capacity to act from alignment rather than fear. Because manifestation is not purely energetic, it also requires stepping into the world as the version of yourself who already holds the result. And that leads us directly into the next crucial stage: action that emerges from intuition, coherence, and identity, not survival or pressure. Quantum timelines, the version of you who has already done the impossible. One of the most powerful ideas in quantum manifestation is that multiple versions of you already exist across different timelines. Each version represents a unique combination of thoughts, emotions, choices, and identity states. In physics, this is described as the superposition of selves. All the possible expressions of who you can become already exist as potential. When people say they're becoming their best self, they're actually aligning with a timeline where that version of them is already fully formed. Creating the impossible does not require inventing a new reality. It requires shifting your frequency to match the version of you who already lives that reality effortlessly. Think of it like tuning a radio. Multiple stations are broadcasting at the same time, but you only hear the one you're tuned into. Quantum timelines function the same way. The version of you who healed, succeeded, or broke through limitations is broadcasting right now, but your emotional state determines whether you can access that signal. When someone feels expansive, grateful, or certain, they tune into higher frequency timelines. When they feel fear, guilt, or self-doubt, they tune into lower frequency ones. The field doesn't force outcomes. It simply reflects the signal you're aligned with. That's why tiny emotional shifts can produce massive changes in physical reality. A practical example. Imagine someone trying to manifest a breakthrough in their business. One timeline contains the version of them who stays small, avoids risk, and doubts themselves. Another timeline contains the version who is confident, intuitive, and aligned with opportunities. Both timelines exist simultaneously. Which one materializes depends on which identity the person embodies. When they shift their inner state, choosing courage instead of fear, clarity instead of confusion, they align with the timeline where the breakthrough has already happened. Suddenly, coincidences appear, ideas emerge, and resources show up. This isn't fantasy, it's resonance. The beauty of quantum timelines is that you don't need to figure out the entire path. You only need to embody the emotional and identity frequency of the self who already achieved what you desire. Once you align with that version, the field begins reorganizing circumstances around you. But this introduces a critical question. How do you bring this version of yourself into your nervous system and daily life, instead of leaving it as an abstract spiritual concept? That requires learning how to become the timeline internally before it appears externally. Inspired action. When the field opens, unexpected paths. Most people associate action with effort, pressure, or logic-driven planning. But in advanced quantum manifestation, the action that truly collapses timelines is inspired action, the kind that emerges naturally from alignment, not anxiety. When someone reaches coherence and begins resonating with a particular timeline, the field starts presenting opportunities, ideas, and impulses that feel oddly timed yet deeply appropriate. This kind of action isn't forced. It feels like a nudge, a pull, a quiet knowing. And when followed, it often leads to outcomes that seem impossible from a purely rational perspective. Inspired action has a unique quality. It bypasses the ego's fear and moves straight from intuition into expression. It might look like calling someone you suddenly remembered, taking a different route to work, sending a message you've been postponing, or researching something you randomly felt drawn to. These steps may appear small, but they align you with a larger pattern of synchronicity already unfolding. Greg Braden describes this as the field communicating in whispers. When you're coherent, these whispers become instructions. When you're in survival mode, they're drowned out. Inspired action happens when you're tuned to the frequency of the solution. A practical example. Someone trying to manifest a new career might suddenly feel inspired to attend an event they normally wouldn't. At the event, they meet a person who offers an opportunity they couldn't have engineered logically. Another person trying to heal emotionally might feel compelled to journal, meditate, or reach out to an old mentor. And that single action becomes the catalyst for a breakthrough. The key is that inspired action feels clean. It carries certainty without tension. It feels guided, not pressured. And most importantly, it creates movement in directions the rational mind never would have considered. Inspired action is the field's way of revealing the path your intuition already recognized before your mind could analyze it. And now that you're integrating this level of awareness, I invite you to reflect on your own experience. When was the last time you felt a sudden inner impulse that seemed illogical, yet undeniably right? Share your experience in the comments. Your story might help someone recognize their own inspired signal. And this leads us directly to the next layer of advanced manifestation, the fear of greatness and the subtle forms of spiritual self-sabotage that often appear right before the breakthrough. Fear of greatness and spiritual self-sabotage, the last barrier. One of the most misunderstood barriers in quantum manifestation is the fear of greatness. People often assume they're afraid of failure, but in many cases, what they truly fear is expansion. Greatness requires visibility, responsibility, and a level of inner power that many individuals were never taught to hold. When someone approaches a breakthrough, their nervous system may react as if they're in danger. Not because success is harmful, but because it is unfamiliar. The brain seeks familiarity, not fulfillment. So right when a person aligns with a bold new timeline, old emotional programs begin to activate, pulling them back toward their comfort zone. This is where spiritual self-sabotage appears. It's subtle, intelligent, and often disguised as guidance. A person may say, maybe this isn't my time, or I think the universe wants me to wait. But most of the time, these statements reflect fear wearing a spiritual costume. True intuition feels clear, grounded, and quiet. Sabotage feels noisy, dramatic, or urgent. For example, someone finally aligned with a career breakthrough might suddenly procrastinate, doubt themselves, or overthink. Another person on the edge of entering a powerful relationship may convince themselves they're not ready. The field isn't withholding anything. The person is stepping away from what they already summoned. Fear of greatness also comes from old identity patterns. If someone spent years seeing themselves as the one who struggles, the one who sacrifices, or the one who goes unnoticed, stepping into a timeline of success creates cognitive and emotional dissonance. Their external reality starts expanding faster than their internal identity, creating friction that feels unsafe. The nervous system interprets visibility, opportunity, or abundance as threats because they contradict the familiar self-image. So the person subconsciously pulls back, not because they don't deserve greatness, but because their body doesn't know how to hold it yet. Understanding this is liberating. Your breakthrough isn't blocked by the universe. It's blocked by the version of you who doesn't yet feel safe being powerful. Once this is clear, the next step becomes obvious. You must create rituals, habits, and emotional practices that stabilize you in the new timeline, so greatness becomes familiar rather than threatening. And that leads directly to our next topic: the advanced protocols that turn the physics of faith into a daily practice that rewires your identity from the inside out. Advanced manifestation protocols, the daily rituals of the physics of faith. Advanced manifestation is not about occasional bursts of motivation or moments of emotional intensity. It's about building a consistent internal environment where the impossible becomes predictable. To create the extraordinary, your nervous system, identity, and emotional patterns must become familiar with expansion. This is why protocols are essential. They are not rigid routines. They are vibrational stabilizers. When practiced daily, they recalibrate your internal state into coherence, allowing the quantum field to respond more clearly and consistently. These protocols integrate intention, emotion, awareness, and physiology into one unified system. The first pillar is stillness. Every day, even 2 minutes of silence shift you out of survival chemistry and into presence. This opens the doorway to coherence. The second pillar is heart activation, often through heart-focused breathing or gratitude recall. Gratitude is one of the fastest ways to generate elevated emotion, signaling to the field that expansion is safe. The third pillar is identity rehearsal, visualizing and emotionally embodying the version of yourself who has already achieved the impossible. Neuroscience shows that the brain doesn't distinguish between imagined and lived experience when emotion is present. This means identity practice literally rewires neural pathways. The fourth pillar is intentional release, also known as the quantum surrender. After aligning with your future self, you let go of how and when the timeline unfolds. This reduces interference and keeps your signal clean. The fifth pillar is listening for intuitive cues, which often appear as subtle impulses, ideas, or micro opportunities throughout the day. The final pillar is inspired action, where you respond to these cues with trust instead of hesitation. Every time you follow an intuitive nudge, you strengthen your alignment with the timeline you're collapsing, making synchronicity a normal part of your life. These protocols, when practiced consistently, transform manifestation from a hopeful practice into a predictable, energetic process. They train your system to remain stable even when external reality has not yet caught up with your internal shift. And once these rituals become part of your daily lifestyle, a deeper transformation unfolds. You stop manifesting and start becoming the field itself, an extension of consciousness expressing through matter. This brings us to the final and most advanced stage of creation, living as the embodiment of the physics of faith. Becoming the field, living as the embodiment of the physics of faith. There comes a moment in advanced manifestation when the seeker stops trying to use the quantum field and realizes they are an expression of it. This is the shift from trying to influence reality to understanding that reality is responding to the state of your being. You are not a separate observer attempting to mold the universe from the outside. You are a vibrational node within the field itself. When someone reaches this level, manifestation becomes less like asking and more like expressing. Their desires emerge from coherence, not scarcity. Their actions arise from intuition, not fear. Their identity stabilizes into a state where the impossible feels natural. Living as the field means that you no longer chase synchronicities. They become a byproduct of your alignment. You move from timeline to timeline through internal shifts, not external force. You no longer overthink decisions because your intuition has become louder than your doubt. You interact with life with an inner softness that comes from trust rather than control. Even challenges no longer feel like threats. They become part of the intelligent feedback loop of consciousness guiding you toward deeper coherence. You begin to sense that life is unfolding with you, not against you. This is the true physics of faith in motion. At this stage, your emotional body becomes the compass of your reality. Your intuition becomes your navigation system. Your identity becomes the stabilizer of your timeline. And your coherence becomes the bridge between the invisible and the visible. You embody the frequency of your future self so deeply that the external world has no choice but to reorganize around it. This is not arrogance, it's alignment. This is not fantasy, it's physics. When someone becomes the field, the boundary between spiritual and physical dissolves. Life becomes a dance between intention and synchronicity, creation and surrender, consciousness and form. And if this journey expanded your understanding, strengthened your faith, or helped you reconnect with the Creator within you, I invite you to support this work with a like and a subscription. It helps this content reach more people who are ready to step into their power and embody the physics of faith at the highest level. Your engagement is part of the field we're building together, one coherent heart at a time. And stay with us, because this series is only the beginning of what you're truly capable of becoming.